All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Ashley Limbers, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator at Total Computer Solutions. Total Computer Solutions is a full-service provider of IT support and services, including network security, cloud computing, network administration, and managed backup services in Central North Carolina. Today we are hosting Data Management and Data Protection Solution presented by Paul Sorge, Disaster Recovery Specialist from StorageCraft. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel, and I'll bring them up at the end of the presentation during our Q&A. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Paul. Our presenter today is a Territory Partner Manager covering the Carolinas and resides in Charlotte. Paul brings 35 years of experience in IT infrastructure and architectures, particularly around compute and data storage technologies. He has an interest in ransomware and protection strategies using StorageCraft snapshot technologies.
Perfect. Ashley, thanks so much for having me to the webinar today. And we certainly appreciate all the people that are attending here to be with StorageCraft and also Total Computer Solutions. So as Ashley mentioned, I'm a data recovery specialist here for StorageCraft in the Mid-Atlantic area, specializing in data protection solutions. And I put together a slide deck for us for our webinar today, just talking about some of the things and terminologies that where it comes to actually doing data protection. Now, when you're looking at COVID or post-COVID activities that are happening currently right now, data protection and data management are becoming really principal concerns regarding the organization. Once you start deploying workspace or distant content working solutions, how you're protecting those particular workers and backing up the data that they're actually creating it when they're not in the office has become one of the things that are top mind for a lot of IT directors and even business continuity managers inside of organizations. So we're going to be talking about a few of those things today. So with that, I'll just kind of kick it off here and we'll go forward. So just a little bit about StorageCraft. You know, it wouldn't be a presentation, or at least I couldn't really do my job if I didn't tell you what StorageCraft is. You know, we're certainly not the Amazon, IBM, or maybe the VMware type of household or desktop or even tabletop names that you might be familiar with. But StorageCraft has actually been in this business for quite some time. We were founded in 2003, and actually the snapshot technology that you may or not know that was way back in the early 90s called Ghost, which became part of Symantec at one point in time, was the intellectual property of our original founders there. There were some intellectual conversations that were happening when Symantec actually tried to buy the intellectual property. It was repurposed back to the original founders of Ghost, and they basically used that snapshot technology that became part of the StorageCraft solution. So, but we're a global company. We are pretty much 100% focused on the channel, which means we always go through a value-added reseller or a managed service provider like Total Computer Solutions to actually supply the technologies to manage whether it's desktop, laptops, server, or business continuity or disaster recovery type of solutions. We're heavily invested, we're certainly profitable, and we've certainly been expanding our growth into a lot of different areas. And one is just recently, and I'll talk to it a little bit, about cloud application backup regarding Office 365 and also G Suite. So I'll go right into it. And one of the things that we're talking to a lot of clients these days, and you know, it wouldn't be a data protection or data management program if you didn't really talk about the technology evolution that's currently happening right now. You know, I can remember when I first started my IT career when I was working at Radio Shack back almost 35 plus years ago in Norwalk, Connecticut, where if you wanted to buy a 10 megabyte drive, it was $600 to put in a 286 machine that probably cost you close to $4,000. Now a 10 megabyte drive, I mean, come on, it's like 10 gigabytes. You can almost get that in a USB stick that's free in a Cracker Jacks box, right? So the data explosion has actually been driven not so much by the computers themselves or the big data centers that might have happened in the growth 60s, 70s, 80s. It's really happening between you and I. As the PDA devices actually became more ubiquitous, and the fact that you can capture this data literally on hand, whether it's audio, video, pictures, or creating PDFs, or just the idea that you have the applications that are independent of client-server technology, you see this complete data explosion that's happening currently right now. So, and this is the trends where it's really thwarting a lot of people to get their arms around how do we actually know what our growth is going to be, and how do we know that we can properly project, that we can actually back it up with a certain level of confidence that if there was a disaster or a business continuity event that might impact our operations, that we can recover with a certain degree of confidence and close to 100% success. So these trends that you're seeing currently right now have been going, and certainly I think that there's a 5x trend, but in the next 5 years, that the last 30 years of data that we've actually created is going to be created in the next 5. Just indicates that this data explosion is obviously exponential, and it's hard to keep up. So the data growth challenges really here is broken down into what StorageCraft, or what the industry really indicates, is really in 2 formats. It's what we call structured data and unstructured data. And when we talk about structured data, it's very similar to the things that you and I probably use on a regular basis. Anybody that's in an organization that uses some type of SaaS application, SAP, Oracle, Concur, those applications that are basically database applications, where you're looking up and retrieving information, or you might be key entering some data fields in there to record something, or it's basically what we call the structured data. In other words, they're tier 1 applications that you and I are very familiar, whether it's SAP, Oracle, SQL, that type of information. And from an IT or a business owner perspective, I can pretty much project what that data growth, if any, is going to be. And for the most part, it's relatively flat. Database, client records, easy. I just need to manage it, and there might be some small growth, or there might be negative growth just simply because data records might get archived off the secondary storage. I don't need to really worry about it. But what's really growing exponentially, which is tying into the previous slide I actually showed you, is the unstructured data portion. The unstructured data portion are really the stuff that you and I create on a day-to-day basis. These are audio, video, music, and maybe also content files that you and I create that are basically very, very hardware dependent, and also software and very mixed media dependent, which requires a lot of this space. It's not unusual that if I go on my iPhone and I capture a 4-minute video that might be 30 frames per second, that file alone could be 2 to 3 gigabytes worth of data that actually might reside if I want to do a certain resolution of 720 or even 1080 DDP. So you can understand that that data can actually eat up a device or a data center or just a device like a laptop or a desktop workstation exponentially. So this is the data where people are struggling to actually try and get and project what it's going to be. So when I'm building out maybe a data frame or introducing an application or backing up data, I need to take this data growth in response to the users that are creating it. Now, you might be saying, well, I really don't want to back up, personal data that might be music files or videos or Netflix or maybe stuff that's coming from Apple iTunes. But you never know. Some of that data can actually be there. And if you have a certain amount of data trends that are happening there, you might be actually backing up things that might be personal libraries, et cetera, when that could be backing up to the cloud. What we're trying to do is to make sure that you understand it and project it. And basically, you don't necessarily have to put storage on the same data frame for something that might be very important to the business, or something that's low and critical or lower performance, and put it on very expensive storage. So if you go to the right side of this slide, you see the pyramid structure. If I need something that requires instant access, for instance, if I'm running a data center or if I'm running a call center and I call a repair, and I'm calling up a help desk, I probably want to look up my records or my account records to find out what the solution may or may not be, or if I'm looking to find out information when I call support for a credit card company or maybe a transaction I'm doing with a particular client, right? I probably want very quick access there. So therefore, my storage needs and basically the speed at which I require that information is going to be very critical. Whereas, for instance, something that might be an audio file, a video file, a PDF that might be extremely big, which is pretty much a go-get when I can go to a data frame and actually pull that file down, I can receive it through the internet, or I can receive it through my data network in pieces and chunks, because I know at some point in time I'm going to have the complete data file. But it's not necessarily dependent or require the same latency or the same quickness as to something that might be tier 1, for instance, like a SQL database or somebody calling a call center. So we'll talk more about this as we go. But this comes into really the capacity problem. If all these people are creating this data, how do I figure out or project all this data that they're creating that's part of my network, that might even be my intellectual property, or the data that might be customer or client dependent? How do I make the capacity to this? So this is where the over-provisioning problem actually comes into play, right? It's very hard to predict what that's going to be like. At StorageCraft, what we do is that we give you tools to understand both structured data and unstructured data, so you can make a determination that if I need to have this capacity that's in my data center, or working with Total Computer Solutions and say, hey, listen, my capacity this year is going to be X. Can you manage this for me in your cloud, or maybe even the StorageCraft cloud, so you can predict what my storage requirements are, so I can actually lower my capacity cost, and also make sure that I have the capacity, so if I need to retrieve files, I can do it with certain predictions. So we help clients run through this capacity issue, or understand it, so they can make better decisions to lower cost. So the data protection challenges, and I'm going to go those in a little bit more detail when it comes to the acronyms. And that's going to be the recovery time objectives, the recovery point objectives, and the recovery time actuals. So we'll get into that right in a few, but I wanted to go over this because this is the challenge here, right? Data can be lost, data can be compromised, data can become compromised, data can be hacked, data can be ransomed. So there's a lot of things, and data's worth money, right? And people know that. So if you look at the hacks and you look at the people that have ransomwares, the data protection is getting to those data files, whether it's a back door, front door, or whatever the case might be, to somehow compromise your systems, to basically find out whether or not you have the propensity to actually pay to try and recover it, okay? Here at StorageCraft, and I'll get into it in my next slide when we start talking about data security challenges, we tell people, never pay the ransom, and we'll show you how to actually try and do that in the next slide. But what we're trying to do is really understand backup windows and recovery times. But there's, and this is pretty much not necessarily an IT function. This is a business conversation that needs to happen. Because when we start talking about data protection challenges, if I'm trying to recover something, I have to understand what's the impact if I lose it, and what is my paranoia to actually recover it very quickly. Now, if you go back to the data slide, remember I was talking about structured and unstructured data? For instance, my tier 1 applications, my databases, my customer records, maybe information that's customer sensitive that I need it very quickly, that's going to have a different SLA or service level agreement to actually recover it very quickly, as opposed to somebody that may just have to recover their PDF files, their Excel file, or maybe even their video library, right? Because quite frankly, that's not as important, because some of these data protections that we need to do are going to be dependent upon revenue and maybe even your brand. So we help customers go through the mechanism on understanding the hour cost per downtime, and we can deliver that through the application, and also talk about how it's going to impact the cost of the solution first, and really talk about the business outcome, and then we can work in math backwards to how it's going to actually be placed in technology. So moving on to the data security regarding ransomware, you see this almost every day, what's happening here, and it's not just ransomware, it's hack attacks. Just look at Equifax, for instance. I remember that when it was happening, what, 18 months ago? All of a sudden, the tier 1 application says, well, you know, our tier 1 database has never got infected. Well, wait a minute, you somehow, people that hacked into your particular site, they got my social security number, you're telling me I'm a ransom, and you're telling me my social security is not a tier 1 application because your other applications were protected, but my social security number was basically compromised. What's this all about? So obviously, you know, when it comes to these challenges regarding ransomware damages, they're huge. And it's not a question of some Madison Avenue, Wall Street bank, or big PR marketing firm that is actually getting hacked. These are smaller organizations. They know that money is out there. And I can just tell you the 4 or 5 different county agencies that here in the Carolinas and also in Tennessee that have recently been hacked, and we've been able to help them recover almost instantly, because through our ransomware and Shadow Protect instant recovery that I'll talk about towards the end of my presentation, we allow customers to actually snapshot their data on their data frames in as little as 90 seconds, and do it frequently. So therefore, you have a safe recovery point that's immutable to ransomware, and the instant or virtual recovery technologies that we have built into our programs allow you to get your applications and users back online quickly without paying the ransomware. So this is kind of a game changer, and we'll certainly talk a little bit more about it maybe in the Q&A. So moving forward, we'd like to think that at StorageCraft, one vendor, one solution. So we basically have we encompass data management, data protection, and disaster recovery. So we have 4 major platforms that we help clients. And one is what we call OneSafe, and OneSafe is basically our appliance or our what we call our backup targets. This is really the ransomware data reduction or ransomware protection that we have that supplies the data protection and disaster recovery services. We also have our software suite, which is really our Shadow Safe brand of products. And that's basically the disaster recovery or the intellectual property that's software-based in the data management section. And then we also have what's called our cloud services and our cloud backup protection. And these are where we actually could help clients recover to their own data centers or in the Total Computer Solutions data center, or they can back up to the StorageCraft cloud. We can help you manage all that. So what we like to think is that no matter what the size might be, whether it's SMB, commercial, enterprise, or maybe multinational, is that we pretty much have a solution for the whole gamut that we have in our portfolio. So let's go into some of the terminology when we start talking about business analysis impact. And this is pretty important, and I want to go over this in a little bit more detail and just talk about some of the technologies when we start talking about what we call recovery time objective. When we talk about recovery time objective, we're really talking about is how much downtime can an organization risk, or how paranoid are you? So for instance, a point of disaster is that you have maybe a fire, a building has to be evacuated, or perhaps you have some type of even ransomware hack, or somebody just comes in and be disgruntled and takes a super soaker to your server, your data frame, and all of a sudden wipes out your data, right? The question really becomes is that how much time are you allowed, or how much tolerance do you have? And the tolerance when we talk about recovery time objectives really is based upon the business, okay? So for instance, if I'm Amazon, I can't allow any downtime for Amazon.com if somebody actually wants to purchase something, right? There might be some other tier 1 or tier 3 application in the back end where for some reason that might have a different tolerance, but the web portal itself and transaction, that has to work, okay? Now, I don't know how big or small some of the organizations or businesses that might be on this conference call, but there might be different business units in a commercial account that basically says, okay, sales and marketing that's running a web portal that actually is transacting either scheduling appointment or maybe even product exchanges or purchases can't really go down because that's a source of revenue. However, somebody that needs a SQL database to run a report to find out what the sales analysis, the profit and loss is on a SQL database may not necessarily have to be up and running in 5 minutes. Maybe that's something that can actually be deployed or run up in a day, maybe 48 hours, maybe 72. So again, when we talk about the RTO, recovery point objective or time objective, it's always about the nature of the application, the impact the business has, and how paranoid you really are in that endpoint. So this is where I like to basically talk to clients on is that, the paranoia that stands here is it application dependent, business dependent, and what can you tolerate, because something will happen eventually. So starting to get into that, we start talking into what we call the recovery point objectives. And the recovery point objectives is basically is I have my event, right? And now I'm trying to recover. I'm executing my recovery plan, right? How much data is lost in between that spread between my event and when I execute my plan or my point of recovery. So for instance, again, it's dependent upon the business. It's dependent upon the application. So now what we help with StorageCraft is we can actually help and have defined by application, by policy, and by recovery point objective, we can be extremely granular. We can go as little as 90 seconds, obviously 2 hours, 12 hours, or even 1 day, depending upon that. Now, What's most important here between whether it's the recovery time objective or the recovery point objective, when it comes to the recovery point objective, the smaller the window, in other words, I can't have a delay in executing my recovery, the more cost it's going to be. Kind of makes sense. And precisely when it comes to the recovery time objective, the less time that I can be down, the more it's going to cost to actually deploy that particular solution. So again, there's a balance here between how paranoid, the application, the business need, and also what impact this is going to have on the organization. So there's a lot of things that you need to consider when it comes to when understanding your business impact analysis, because it's sometimes not only just about the data loss and executing the plan, right? And it's not just how much is this going to cost me to actually implement, so I make sure that I have a window that's going to meet my particular business, right? And those costs just can't be, okay, I need to have a backup solution for StorageCraft, right? The total cost of ownership and describing RTO and RTO is always going to be is what impact is that going to have on my brand? What impact is that going to have on my customers? What impact is that going to have on my supply chain? Because these are all the other factors, because it's not just a question of the productivity of the users that are actually looking at those applications. It's my whole ecosystem and my whole value chain that I have and the clients that I do business with that we have to understand the business impact here. So when you're actually looking at your plans, you got to take this in mind and actually think. Now, there was one study that was actually done, I think by the Gartner Group like 3 years ago. And I think it was basically chartered or, for lack of a better word, paid by another big brand out of Boston, which will go unnamed. But anyway, we can still use it as a reference here, is indicating that 70% of the people that actually have a business disaster or business continuity plan, only 30% actually feel that if they had to execute it, they would have success, right? So again, you may have something in place, but how often do you test it, right? That's the other thing. Now, I don't really have a slide here, but if it's okay with you, I'm just going to share and do a couple of talk points. And that's actually talking about your recovery time actual. So in other words, and that's really testing the plan. So for instance, we have certain tools that if you have a disaster and then you actually have a recovery time objective, well, what's the actual when you execute that plan? If for some reason I have my executable or my point of disaster and my point of objective to recover, and I'm inside that window, well, guess what? I'm meeting my objectives in the business and the application. If for some reason my recovery time actual is outside of the window for the recovery point objective, that means I probably have higher costs and I'm not meeting the attributes of the business organization, and that might be impacting more revenue, more productivity, more of my value chain with all my suppliers. So those are some of the things that we help you, and Total Computer Solutions can also help you define what a business analysis impact would be with all these regarding whether it's RTO, RPO, and also the recovery time actuals. Now, you remember when I was talking about the recovery time and also the ransomware, right? One of the features that we have, and then I'll be going into just a quick summary, and then we'll go into some of the Q&A. So if you want to start thinking of some of the questions, we can go from there, is we talk about instant recovery. And this is like really the value proposition. This is the intellectual property that we really help resonates with a lot of particular customers. We have our virtual boot technology, and without getting too technical, it basically means whether you consume something that's on your own premise, or maybe it's in the Total Computer Solutions data center themselves, or maybe it's in the storage cloud, you actually, no matter where your data is, you can instantly start recovering this. So, and this has to do regarding virtual boot technology, where we have a virtual machine that could be going anywhere, whether that's from a laptop, whether that's from a data center, regarding servers that might be running VMware or Hyper-V, Microsoft Hyper-V. We can start actually recovering this service instantly when we know that we have a cloud-based failback or a theory that's known inside of the hypervisor for our technologies. So we can instantly restore the primary storage and start working for getting your services up very, very quickly with minimal operations. So this is something that's not bolted on. It's actually baked into our technologies, and it's part of any solution StorageCraft technologies that we have regarding our ShadowSafe and our OneSafe technologies. So in summary, I hope I gave you a little bit idea of who StorageCraft is, what we do, some of the core competencies, and some of the terminologies to actually look at some of what actually encompasses a data management and data recovery strategy. We offer the data protection strategies that we have regarding our OneSafe technology, our Shadow Protect, and also our cloud backup services. And we'd be happy to work with you and the rest of the Total Computer Solutions team to see if you want to actually look at these technologies, whether that's a recovery strategy or maybe looking at the interface because you might be using something else and you want something that's easy to use and basically can give you data protection right from the keyboard, whether that's from a laptop or all the way into a server or even a data center, and we can give you the resiliency. StorageCraft has a lot of major verticals. Again, we're not a tabletop name, but we're doing business with a lot of major brands. And because we're channel focused and we're kind of baked in into the IT technology stack that we have, we do a lot of business. And again, that's whether it's state and local, enterprise, healthcare, financial, whether it's a small two-person shop all the way up even to Amazon, they see our technologies that are actually built into these platforms. So I like to say, big boy, long pants, we've been here. If you're not already using StorageCraft or thinking about your disaster recovery solutions, you may want to have a conversation with us and Total Computer Solutions so we can help refine those particular plans. So that's basically it. I hope I didn't go too fast. I might be down here in Charlotte. I've only been down here for about 3 or 4 years. I'm originally from New York, so sometimes I talk a little bit too fast. I got to somehow slow down, but maybe you can help me do that with the Q&A. So actually, maybe I'll help you to intercede with the mic there, and we'll go forward.
Thanks, Paul. We'll go ahead and take time for some questions. Just a reminder, please type those into the question box, and we'll wait about 30 seconds to a minute to see if we have any. Okay. Paul, if there's one thing I should take away today from this presentation, what would it be?
So I think if there's one thing is that is understanding really the cost of outages, right? And well, two things: the cost of outages and also the distinction between disaster recovery and business continuity, right? I didn't really talk about business continuity, but a lot of people confuse business continuity with disaster recovery. And I think they're two different disciplines and two different thoughts. Disaster recovery, obviously, if I have a problem and I have a hardware failure or a catastrophic event like lightning or hurricane or something like that, I know that I can fail over to something else. Business continuity is completely different. Business continuity is, it could be that, or it could be part of that, but business continuity could be like post-COVID or pre-COVID, right? All of a sudden I got a virus that's coming in. I don't know what's going to happen. All of a sudden I got to redirect services to make sure that my business is continuing with a different model because I can't have people coming in the office, right? But then again, I have to look at the business continuity because if I got these remote workforces, all of a sudden the data they're creating on stuff that they used to be creating in workstations that might have been in the office, and now they do it on laptops or maybe on their own personal device. How do I back that up? So again, that disaster recovery, business continuity, completely different conversations. So there are distinctions, but they also understanding the cost of the total cost of business recovery, right? And again, what's the impact on my whole value chain? So I tend to think that understanding the total impact or the cost and also disaster recovery and business continuity, I think it would be a couple of key takeaways.
Great, thank you. And then it looks like we have one more question. What is the most important thing when it comes to recovery point objective?
So probably the most important thing with recovery point objective is just the tolerance. You know, how paranoid do I want to be? Again, it's based on that application. And again, the quicker I want to recover, the more expensive it's going to be, right? Because you probably need more discipline, and it could be skills, for instance. It could be just the volume and size of the data that needs to be recovered very quickly. And sometimes it's also the capacity, right? There. So, but just understanding that is probably the most important thing when it comes to RPO.
Great. It looks like we've covered all the questions that we have. Paul, is there anything that you wanted to include, or I think you have a giveaway that we're going to do for the attendees today?
Yeah, I think for the giveaway for the attendees, I'd like you to actually start using Shadow Protect. So I think that we have some trial credit cards. I don't have one with me, but actually I think you have those. I think maybe why don't we have the collection here, and for those people that are registered and we have their addresses and company names, we should be able to send them. It's a trial. It's worth, I think, $99. So it gives you 1 year protection for your client, for your laptop. And so I think that would be great to see the discipline and solutions for Shadow Protect. And I think why don't we give our attendees one of those for attending today's session?
That's a great idea. All right, I think we have some of those, and we can get those out to the attendees after this event. All right, is there anything else you wanted to talk about or wrap up with?
No, I don't think so. Again, I just wanted to thank you very much, Ashley, for having me be part of this session. Look forward to the next one. You guys have been a tremendous partner for StorageCraft here in the Mid-Atlantic and Carolina area, and we always look forward to contributing to helping your clients out. So thanks for being such a great partner.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here today. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.